13th and 18th of April. So that is when we have been told not to go out anywhere.
Yes, sir. And after this, we are expecting one more MCA inspection. That is for permission of 250 seats. This is for confirmation of 200, sir.
Oh.
Next, we have permission of 250.
MCI LRE NMC.
Yeah, NMC. Sorry, sir.
Yes, yes.
It's old wine in new bottles. That's all. There is no difference.
Yes, sir.
The same things happen now also that used to happen earlier.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So we are also expecting the NMC inspection, sir,
Acha.
for renewal of permission for 250 MBBS seats.
Okay. Anyway, it has been a really difficult time with all this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
COVID and
Sir, it's Narayan,
yes.
sir. Yeah, it's
Yes, yes.
7:31, sir. I have made it live
Okay.
on YouTube. Shall I start?
Okay. Yes, sir. Sir, Sharma, sir, shall we
Yes.
start, sir?
yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We can start.
So it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all for this webinar. This is part of the Indian Psychiatric Society Karnataka chapter, which has taken the initiative for mainly PG students to start the IPSKC psychopathology series. So we have totally 9 talks, and we have already finished 5 topics in the psychopathology series. So on this occasion, I would like to welcome our today's chairperson, Dr. PSVN Sharma. So to introduce Dr. PSVN Sharma, he is known all over India as a very good academician. Sir has completed MBBS in Maulana Azad Medical College, New Delhi, and he has completed his DPM in prestigious NIMHANS, Bangalore, and MD in PGI MER in Chandigarh. And Sir has worked as senior resident in NIMHANS in the late Dr. P.S. Gopinath's unit for almost 3 years. And Sir was assistant professor in Central Institute of Psychiatry, Ranchi. And since 1988, Sir has been working in Kasturba Medical College, Manipal. And currently, Sir is a professor of psychiatry. And he has tremendous interest in teaching postgraduate students. Especially his areas of interest are psychopathology and rehabilitation in psychiatry. And he has been a pioneer in establishing the Hombelku in Manipal. And Sir has had the good fortune of guiding 34 MD dissertations and 10 PhD theses. Sir has 156 publications in index journals. So it's our tremendous pleasure to invite our today's chairperson, Dr. PSVN Sharma, sir. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
So I request Dr. Harish Kulkarni to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Bhimsen Tekalki. He will be speaking on disorders of emotion. Over to Dr. Harish Kulkarni.
Thank you, Narayan sir. Good evening, Sharma sir. Good evening, Bhimsen sir. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome and introduce today's speaker, Dr. Bhimsen Tekalki. He has completed his MBBS from KIMS Hubli in 2009. He has completed his MD Psychiatry from King George Medical College, Lucknow in 2013. Sir is currently working as Associate Professor in Psychiatry in Jawaharlal Nehru Medical College, Belagavi. He has done his advanced course in medical education from MCI Regional Center, JNMC. He is pursuing his PhD from KLE University, Belgaum. He has more than 30 publications for his credit. He is also trained in Hindustani classic music and also plays tabla. Sir, we would definitely like to hear your music and tabla in some other session. He finds his interest in watercolor paintings also. I welcome you, sir, and I request today's chairperson, Dr. Sharma, sir, to give a brief introduction about today's topic. Thank you, sir.
thanks to IPS Karnataka chapter for having me here with all of you. It's an interesting innovation to discuss psychopathology for the postgraduates, and probably also as a revision for all of us old timers who have forgotten psychopathology. I think probably understanding and assessment of emotions is probably one of the more difficult parts of understanding psychopathology. And what makes it even more difficult is achieving some sort of iterator reliability in assessment of emotions. There's a lot of subjectivity involved. There is other factors come into the picture. For example, culture comes into the picture of assessment of emotion, gender, age, background of the individual, so many things. So despite being such a central theme in our specialty, we still have sometimes face difficulty in understanding emotions, not only of others but ourselves also. And despite it belonging to the so-called primitive brain, we've still not really come to grips with it adequately. And as a result of which, we need to emphasize in our training for postgraduate students and interns the intricacies of the experience of emotions and the expression of emotions and how we interpret them in the clinical situation. And I think Dr. Bhimsen will be talking to us about this, and I hope all the postgraduates are keenly waiting for this lecture demo. Dr. Bhimsen.
Thank you, sir. Very good evening to everyone. At the outset, I would like to extend my thanks to the organizers of this psychopathology lecture series. My special thanks to Dr. Harish Kulkarni, who has been the connecting point between me and the organizers all these days. I also extend my thanks to Sharma sir. It's a privilege to have him around when we have discussions on topics like emotions and any topic in psychopathology for that matter. Sir made my job a little easy by setting the right, what should I say, pretext that disorders of emotions or emotions in general are difficult to interpret and to assess. And I hope I'll do justice to this topic. And if I do not, then I hope others don't get disappointed, because I also felt a lot of difficulty in understanding because it was a sort of revision for me as well. And the problem is different textbooks have a lot of different ways of approaching this topic and a lot of subjectivity involved. So, but I hope I'll do justice to this topic. So the learning objectives. At the end of this lecture, teaching learning activity, the learner should be able to define and differentiate the terms like emotion, mood, and affect. He should be able to identify the basic emotions, and he should be able to elicit affect and its different components, and he should be able to identify common abnormalities of emotions. So I have prepared these presentations with these objectives in mind. The overview of presentation, initially I'll be discussing definitions, and then a brief discussion about theories of emotion, and a very brief, rather a single slide on neurobiology of emotions, then clinical assessment of emotions, which probably is going to make the major chunk of this presentation, and at the end, summary. Yeah, let's begin with a spotter. So here is a video where a daughter is interacting with her mother. Mother, the old lady, has some emotional disturbance. I want the audience, especially the postgraduates, to try to identify what is the abnormality. And I request you to put your answer in the chat box. The first person who is going to give the right answer can claim his Cadbury Dairy Milk chocolate whenever he or she meets me in person. So here I go.
There's usually not even a lot of mood behind it. It is just a behaviour. Isn't that right? Hey? No. And there's an example, just the outburst of crying. And she's not sad, just crying. And then it can swing the other way, and then you get the laughing. And it can be difficult to manage because it can happen in very inappropriate contexts. But yeah, Mum, you agree with that? No. It's all right.
Okay. I'm not sure. I mean, if someone has answered, because I cannot see the chat box. Organizers can help me with the like who answered it. Anyway,
And there's usually
sorry.
not
The
even
answer
a
is
lot of
emotional incontinence.
mood behind it.
So
It is just a behaviour.
so with this, just
Isn't that right?
kindling,
No.
it's sort of
and there's an
kindling interest. So
example,
let's move
just
on
the
with the
outburst of
slides.
Bhimsen sir, sorry to interrupt. There are two
Yeah.
answers. One is by Abhineet Sayal, lability, and
Okay.
another answer by Shruti MN, inappropriate labeled affect.
Yeah, I think I gave the answer. Answer was emotional incontinence. I'll
Yes.
describe why it is not emotional instability. I'll come to that point later. So
Okay.
I'm happy at least a couple of people try to answer it. Okay, so so the next slide is about definition. Now enters the confusion. So this is where the most confusing part, because there are at least 4 terminologies which are being interchangeably used. And which have been defined in different ways in different textbooks, and in the end the student is more confused than he was before reading textbooks. So these terminologies are feeling, mood, emotion, and affect. So what I have done is I have gotten rid of the feeling part of here, the term feeling. So I have tried to describe only these 3 definitions. Initially I thought of sticking to only 2, affect and mood, which are the clinically relevant components. But I thought both of these definitions have emotion, the word emotion in it. So I thought I should define emotion as well. So the emotion is described as subjective experience with associated physiological changes. So what does it mean? It probably means what I was feeling just few minutes before the lecture began, or what you people would be feeling just few minutes before entering the Viva hall. So it's an experience with associated physiological changes. For example, you might be having little palpitations, little tremors before entering the Viva hall. So that is what an emotion is. Now, what is an affect? Affect is how you display this emotion outside. It is an observable behavior seen in the expression of emotion. So this is displayed through various modes like facial expressions, gestures, posture, eye-to-eye contact, and various other things. So basically, affect is what you can see from outside, and what reflects your feeling, which is inside, that is reflected outside, is observable behavior is affect. Whereas mood is a sustained and pervasive tone of emotion, which is felt internally. So mood is something which is often reported, and affect is something which often you observe. See, many a times we ask our friend, hi dude, you are feeling low, anything wrong with you? So that is what an affect is. So we have inferred that that person is looking dull, looking low, looking depressed. So this observable behavior, which is seen in the expression of emotion, is affect, and what a person feels inside is a mood. Affect is said to be temporary, transient, whereas mood is said to be sustained. Coming to basic emotions, Ekman and et al. In their study were able to identify 6 basic emotions. Of course, a different group of researchers, I believe Izzard et al. Have given 11 basic emotions, but I stick to this particular authors because I thought it's easier, and these are commoner emotions than very complicated others enlisted elsewhere. So the 6 basic emotions are anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, and surprise. And based on different permutations and combinations of these basic emotions, we see a lot of other emotions like perplexity or dysphoria, so on and so forth. But these are the basic emotions. Coming to theories of emotions, and again there are many theories. There are at least half a dozen of theories, but I chose to stick to these three theories because of the sake of simplicity. The first theory to begin with is James Lange theory, which is the first theory, probably first effort to explain emotions. And these authors explained that emotions are the result of self-awareness of physical and bodily changes in presence of a stimulus. What does it mean? It means that, again, let's go back to the example of a student who is anticipating say exams. So what does this theory mean? This means that that student feels anxious secondary to his or her bodily changes. That means she feels anxious secondary to her appreciation of her palpitations, tremors, dizziness, so on and so forth. So I feel anxious because of my bodily changes. I feel angry because of my tensed muscles, clenched jaw, and so on and so forth. And as anybody can see, there is hardly any logic in this theory because emotions are very rapid to set in, and emotions don't wait for us to appreciate our physiological changes and then feel something. So that's why this theory was not was widely disregarded. So the second theory was Cannon-Bard theory, and this second theory is basically the criticism of the first theory. And Cannon and Bard argue that no, it's not the way. The right way is first you feel the emotions and then you feel the physiological changes. It's not you are anxious because of palpitations. It's you are anxious, that's why you have palpitations. So that is the second theory. And as you can observe, neither of these theories have discussed about the cognitive element of emotions. I mean, neither of these theories didn't bother to think why that person is emotional at the first place. And that brings us to the third theory, which was Shastra and Singer's two-factor theory of emotion, which postulates that there is something called cognitive element as well. Why a student appearing for YOC feels anxious? Because she's not sure what's going to happen, whether she will get easy questions or difficult questions, whether she's pass or fail. So that uncertainty, that appraisal of the situation, the cognition leads to the emotions and subsequently bodily changes. And this has a lot of clinical relevance. Even in theory, I mean, even in therapies like cognitive therapies, cognitive behavioral therapies. Coming to the functions of emotions. So how these emotions help us? What is the role of emotions? So emotions help us to, one, self-perception. So a person, it is because of emotions we know what is going inside us, or what are we going through. So that is self-perception. And second thing is communication. We heavily rely on emotions for communication's sake. So we use a lot of emotion to communicate ourselves with others. And third thing is motivation. So emotions are one of the reasons for our actions. They are our motivation. So they motivate us to do or not to do something. That's based on our current state of emotion at that point of time. So basically the functions of emotions are self-perception, communication, and motivation. Neurobiology of emotions at a glance, as I have already mentioned, I'm not going in detail. In fact, it is just one slide because it itself is a topic in itself. So I assume all of you have heard about Pepage circuit and limbic system and different parts of brain involved with emotions. So I'm not going in that detail. The point I want to make here is some theories or some rules with respect to emotion. Those rules are, the rule number one is overall right hemisphere is dominant when it comes to emotion. Probably we all know that left hemisphere is dominant when it comes to language. So in similar way, right hemisphere is dominant when it comes to emotions. The second rule is right hemisphere is associated with negative emotions, feeling of negative emotions, whereas left hemisphere is associated with feeling of positive emotions. And the fourth rule is right hemisphere is dominant for the perception of emotion related to cues like identifying whether somebody is sad or happy or based on his facial expressions, so on and so forth. Now coming to the main part, that is assessment of emotional expression, in other words, affect. So again, different textbooks have different subheadings. I thought Tasman is clinically more relevant. So this table is from Tasman, and the Tasman has described affect in these subheadings like appropriateness, intensity, mobility, range, and reactivity. So in appropriateness, basically we want to know whether the affect is appropriate, congruent, or otherwise. And in intensity, we want to know whether the intensity of emotion or the affect is normal, or it is blunted, exaggerated, flat, heightened, dramatic, so on and so forth. In mobility, whether the affect is mobile or it is constricted, fixed, immobile, so on and so forth. So is range and reactivity. So to start with, disturbance of intensity of emotion. And then the first thing is blunted affect. So blunted affect is something where the person has almost no emotional expression. So the face, and it has two components. Emotional blunting has two components. One is loss of facial expression and second is evolution. Loss of facial expression is the expression is either absent or very shallow, or it is very constricted. And the face looks like an expressionless face, like a mask-like face, as you can see in the third picture here. So it is a picture, just when a person finds out that he has one would be like this first picture. And a person with constricted emotion, constricted affect will be is something like second picture, whereas a person with blunted affect looks like something like third picture. So there is loss of emotional expression, and also there is evolution. That means the person is indifferent or unconcerned for his own present and also his future. Other disturbance of intensity is aprosodia. So before understanding what is aprosodia, you should know what is prosody. Prosody means ability to express one's own emotions through our spoken language, through our facial expressions, through our gestures. Uh, so when this is absent, we call it as aprosodia. For better understanding, I have a video here, and who else is more suitable to demonstrate prosody than a voiceover artist? So here I am presenting Sonal Kaushal, a celebrated voiceover artist, defining prosody. So
अरे यार, मैं पत्ते नहीं खाऊंगा। एक बार बहुत भूख लग रही थी, तब खाए थे, और अगले दिन सुबह सुबह बाथरूम में गोबर निकला, काला काला।
So I believe you have appreciated how her facial expressions changed with the content of what her speech. So depending on what she's speaking, her facial expression changed dramatically. Her eyes, her muscles of facial expressions change dramatically, and her voice has an intonation to it, ups and downs. This is what we call it as prosody. And when this is lost, we call it as aprosodia. A classic example is how robots speak. So no matter what a robot is speaking, he speaks in a single monotonous voice. You can imagine from the movie Robo or any other clips of Robo speaking. So there will not be this ups and downs of tones, and also there will not be emotional quotient attached to it. This aprosodia can be divided as motor aprosodia and receptive aprosodia. Motor aprosodia is when somebody is unable to express his emotions through this language and expressions, whereas receptive aprosodia is when somebody is unable to appreciate someone else's emotion in their language and gestures. So aprosodia is basically seen in autistic spectrum disorders, schizophrenias, and rarely in depressive disorders.
अरे यार।
So the next in the line are anhedonia, apathy, and evolution. Anhedonia is inability to feel pleasure. So it is that the person does not derive any pleasure in any activity which he used to enjoy earlier. To give an example, it is like eating a rasagulla without dipping it in sugar syrup. So the anhedonia will be a similar feeling. You don't find pleasure in anything you are doing. It's very bland. And it's specific to only the feeling of joy. Whereas apathy is inability to feel any emotion. Anhedonia is inability to feel joy, whereas apathy is inability to feel any emotion, whether it is joy, whether it is anger, whether it is frustration, whether it is anxiety, anything. So anhedonia is commonly seen in depression. It might also be found out in patients with schizophrenia. Apathy is seen in chronic cases of schizophrenia and maybe chronic cannabis abuse and some other conditions. Evolution is inability or lack of motivation to do voluntary activities. And this is also seen in schizophrenia, chronic schizophrenia. Those were the conditions where the intention was on lower side. And the subsequent conditions are where the intensity of emotions is on higher side. So this condition, vigilshood, also called as moria, is a condition where a person cannot refrain himself from making jokes of any situation. So that person is always jocular, always cracks puns and jokes, even in the serious most situations. But he's not really happy. The affect is very shallow. You cannot relate to with that jokes or with that happiness. So this kind of conditions can be seen in frontal lobe injuries, frontal disinhibition syndrome, and emotional incontinence, as I have already demonstrated in the video earlier. So this emotional incontinence can be seen in frontotemporal dementias, strokes, so on and so forth. Coming to disturbances in variability, or also called as mobility. Before going to this concept of variability or mobility or range, let us understand what is range in first place. So range is an ability of a person to express all emotions at appropriate time or on appropriate stimulus in appropriate quantum or quantity. So if somebody is able to express emotions appropriately at appropriate extent, we call that person to be having normal range or euthymic affect. For example, here in this picture, this circle represents euthymic affect. For the sake of simplicity, I have taken emotions here, 4 basic emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, and fear. And as you can see, this circle incorporates all these 4 emotions equally. So that means the person is displaying all these emotions equally and appropriately. So that's why we are calling him to be having euthymic affect or normal range of affect. Whereas this is what a constricted affect looks like. This is an effort of graphical representation, and this is how a constricted affect looks like. The person here also is displaying all the emotions, but to a lesser extent, and emotions are not freely, the mobility is less. The person is not freely moving from one emotion to other emotion, and though all the emotions are expressed, but to a lesser extent. That's why we call it as constricted affect. And this is how restricted affect looks like, where the person is expressing predominantly only sadness. He is not expressing any other emotions despite giving proper appropriate stimuli. And in the end, this is how a blunted affect looks like. Absolutely almost no emotions displayed at all. If you ask me the reference, I don't have a reference for this particular concept. Of course, yes, Tasman comes close to this concept. This is what we have learned from our teachers, but I thought this is clinically relevant, so I thought I'll put it here. So another disturbance of mobility is emotional lability. These constricted, restricted emotions are when the mobility is reduced. whereas lability of emotion is when there is increased or excessive mobility. So emotional lability is defined as a rapid change in emotions without any stimulus, external stimulus. So it's classically seen in manics. Like manics, they are happy, cheerful, and suddenly they start crying without any external stimulus. You have not given any stimulus to make them cry, but they suddenly start crying. So that is emotional lability. Emotional lability is different from emotional incontinence, where there is in emotional lability, at least to begin with, the person has appropriate response to emotion, but suddenly he switches to a different emotions. Whereas in emotional incontinence, the person has a similar emotion to all the stimulus, and the person is not really feeling that inside. That's what that lady was telling, that her mother is not really sad, but she's just displaying that sadness. So that is very shallow here. So in the next slide, there is a video which is basically an interview I have done to demonstrate the affect and the range of affect. The person who has played patient here is our own postgraduate, Dr. Nishi, who is playing a role of a depressed patient. And I should thank our senior resident, Dr. Puneet Mutalik, for his technical support in recording this video.
Hello Nishi, good morning. So this is regarding the health issues for which you have come to me. Nishi, I would like to know a few more details about your state of mind and what are you going through so that I can help you better. So would you mind answering a few questions? So first I would like to know, Nishi, how have you been feeling in last 1 week? Okay, so you have been feeling sad for last like almost for 1 week. Okay, so was it like occasionally you felt sad or for the whole day you were feeling sad? How was it like? Most part of the day. Okay, so was there any time of the day you felt a bit better? Mornings were a little better, but as the day went by, it just became worse. Okay. So, was there anything that lifted your mood? I spoke to some friends, listening to music, like I felt a little better, but with the sadness, like it came back. Okay, so music made you feel better a bit. Okay, so would you like to tell me what kind of music you like? I like Bollywood music, Hindi songs. Okay. Arjit Singh, Shreya Ghosal, I like peppy songs and it's nice to know that music keeps you little better for at least for some time. Ishi, you mentioned that you were asked to pay bribe for the job you had applied for, isn't it? So how do you feel? Horrible. Like I've always been a good student. I worked very hard to reach where I am, and in spite of doing well in the interview and being more qualified than the other candidates, just because I didn't pay the bribe, I didn't get the job, and it's not fair. It's not right. Yeah, I can understand. You might have felt terrible. I can understand. You also mentioned that on the same day you were just preoccupied with this thought that you couldn't get this job and you were riding back to your home and you just in a fraction of a second you missed a horrible accident, is it? Yeah, oh my god. My car almost collided with another car, and in that moment, I thought I was going to die right then and there. I was very, very horrified and very scary accident. So at least it's good that you escaped from this. So nice. Okay, Nishi.
Okay, actually the idea was to demonstrate what was the predominant effect in the patient, and also to demonstrate the mobility of the effect and the reactivity of the effect. So this hypothetical patient, I chose reactive depression rather than endogenous depression, because I thought in this kind of patients, you can demonstrate the mobility or reactivity of mood. So in this hypothetical patient, this is an educated young lady who was denied a job which she aspired to get, just because she didn't agree to pay bribe, and that led to an episode of depression. So in this short video, I tried to give different stimuli to see whether she can display different emotions, like when and also I tried to know the diurnal variability. Strictly speaking, many people argue that diurnal variability is not a part of mental status examination, but Tasman says that as a part of assessment of mood, you can still ask the diurnal variability, and she mentioned that it's worse in the evening, which goes well with the reactive depression. And you can, I think you could appreciate how she displayed a bit of happiness when she was speaking about her favorite singer, her favorite songs, so on and so forth. And she also displayed a good amount of anger when she discussed this issue of bribe and all. And she also displayed a bit of fear when she described this event of accident. So this was the idea, and if there were any errors in interpretation, I think Dr. Sharma sir will help us with. Okay, coming to the other next subheading of disturbed emotions.
Sorry to interrupt. There's a question for you, Vincent.
Yes, sir.
Somebody is asked, anonymous, difference between shallow and blunt affect.
Blunt affect is when there is absolutely no emotional reaction, whereas shallow affect is there is some emotional display. For example, the person is laughing or the person is crying, but he is not sad or happy from inside. I mean, you won't relate that he's really sad or happy. So that's where we call it as shallow. For example, that lady in that first video, she was just crying, but she was not sad. So these kind of expressions are called as shallow emotions. Whereas blunt is there is absolutely when there is no emotional expression at all. It is like a mask face. I hope I have answered your question. Yeah, moving ahead, appropriateness of emotions. So there are again two subheadings here, whether the emotions are appropriate or congruent. Appropriateness is with respect to situation, and congruency is with respect to thought. For example, if someone, I mean, attending a funeral, if he suddenly starts smiling or laughing, that becomes inappropriate effect, because that is not appropriate to the situation. It might not necessarily be incongruent, because he might have, he might not be very closely associated with the person who is deceased. He might have just attended that funeral just for the sake of formality, and he might have recalled some joke or something at that point of time. So it might not be incongruent, or it might be, we don't know, but at least it is inappropriate to the situation. So appropriateness is with respect to situation, whereas congruency is with respect to the thought. So if, like, for example, if somebody, if we often see in patients, especially patients with schizophrenia, they discuss some difficulties in their life, or they might discuss about the situation where they lost their near and dear one, and they might still be laughing or smiling. So if we ask, like, why you are smiling at this point of time when you should be really sad, and if they give some irrelevant answer for that, so that becomes an incongruent affect. So incongruent affect is when our emotions and thoughts are not congruent to each other. Another example is and inappropriateness is when it is with respect to situation. So as I have already told, given this example of funeral. So the next subheading is recognition of emotions. So recognition of emotions is a human quality. We all are blessed with this ability to recognize our own and others' emotions. And when this doesn't happen, there are some conditions, there are some abnormalities. The first one is alexithymia. Alexithymia is defined as inability to feel one's own emotions and fantasize about one's own emotions and express how somebody is feeling. So it is inability to feel or appreciate our emotions and inability to express our emotions. And this alexithymia is supposed to be seen in patients with somatoform disorders, patients with autistic spectrum disorders, and in some other conditions. And empathy is an ability to understand what someone else is going through. It is ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and to understand what someone else going through with respect to the emotions. And empathy is a very important, what should I say, quality for, as you all know, for a good psychiatrist and a good doctor. With this respect, a concept of mirror neuron it becomes important, and I thought I'll just have a slide about mirror neurons. So these mirror neurons are a set of neurons in our brain which fire when animal performs an action, and also when an animal observes the same action performed by someone else. For example, if you give a banana to a monkey, and if it starts eating, what set of neurons fire in its brain? The same set of neurons fire when it sees someone else or some other monkey eating a banana. So these mirror neurons are located in premotor cortex and inferior parietal cortex in human beings. These set of neurons have a role to play in imitative learning, development of human culture, and acquisition of language. And these neurons are basically responsible for these constructs like empathy and capacity to understand other person's emotional state. To sum up, emotion is an experience associated with physiological changes. Affect is a behavioral expression of emotion, whereas mood is a sustained emotional tone experienced inside. Anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, surprise are 6 basic emotions. Emotions are assessed on these parameters. Those are intensity, appropriateness, mobility, range, and reactivity. Let me tell you, I deliberately didn't go into details of mania, depression, and other clinical disorders because I thought that anyway, I mean, are clinically, you see, but I thought let's focus on phenomenology part or psychopathology part rather than the syndromes or diseases of mood. So this is it. Thank you very much for this opportunity again, and I'll be very happy to take up questions if there are any more.
Thank you.
There is a question, Dr. Bean said,
yes,
can you explain congruency of affect with some example from Mr. Dr. Santosh Kumar?
Yeah, I'll try, sir. I'll try. For example, let's take this example of the schizophrenia patient who was smiling when she was explaining about the loss of her brother. She is explaining how her brother died, and at the same time she is smiling. And when if interviewer asks like why you were smiling when you were explaining this sad incident, and if she says that's because I have one more brother, so why should I worry? So or something, I'm not sure. I mean, this is what right now is coming to my mind, and I'm not sure how appropriate example is this. Basically, this is when your thoughts and emotions are not congruent. Or maybe put it in a better way. This lady who is smiling while explaining her brother's death, she might what should I say? She might say that, I don't know, sir. I'm sorry. If you can explain it in a better way, that would be nice.
If I may,
yes, sir, please.
The point, I mean, I would like to take you back to history, because at one point in time, incongruent affect was considered somewhat characteristic of schizophrenia. Because if you, Dr. Bhimsen, remember in your undergraduate days, my undergraduate days, they used to make this triangle of thought and emotion and volition, and that there is a divorce among all these. So basically, you are assuming what the thought is in the person's head, and then you see that the affect is not going with the thought and you say it is incongruent. The whole problem is that it's very difficult to really know what that person is thinking. While I'm speaking right now, I might be thinking of ice cream. So that's the reason why the congruence thing is a bit of a problem. Although people do use it, it was specifically meant at one time for the understanding of schizophrenic illness. Now we sort of say inappropriate to the situation, and then it is no longer really characteristic of schizophrenia as people earlier thought about it.
Thank you, sir.
Somebody, Dr. Jigar has asked, can we get the recorded webinars link to just note down that the organizers will look at? Dr. Shruti, I think, are emotions and mood the same?
Shruti, they are somewhat similar. They are often used interchangeably. Mood is inner feeling of emotion. So in that way, what I feel from inside when I'm anxious is mood, and anxiety itself is an emotion. They are interchangeable. They are somewhat similar, but that sustained tone of emotion, like that sustained tone, like a depressed patient, what he feels for a significant period of time with him is what we call it as mood. So it's a overlapping concept, but a sustained tone of emotion is called as mood. For example, emotion here is sadness, and the sustained feeling of sadness that somebody is going through or feeling for days together from inside is called as mood.
There's another question from Jamshir M. Can you elaborate again about the difference between constricted and restricted affect?
Okay, let me go to that slide again. Okay, see, this is normal affect graphically when all emotions are displayed at appropriate quantity on appropriate stimulus like happiness, sadness, anger, and fear. This is constricted affect. All emotions are displayed, but at a lesser quantity or at a lesser intensity. So the person still is displaying different emotions, but not, it is again subjective, and here the norm is a normal person. Here the gold standard is a normal person. So though he is displaying emotions, all the emotions, but these emotions are not to the extent we expect in a normal person to those situations. This is constricted. So this restricted is when there is only one or two predominant effects and there is less mobility. Like for example, we saw in that video, though the person was depressed, but she could display other emotions as well with appropriate stimuli. So when the person is not displaying any other any other emotions, when the person is displaying only one particular emotion, that is called as restricted. Whereas constricted is all emotions are displayed, but to a lesser extent. I hope that's clear.
Yes, Dr. Rekha. So the difference between blunted and flat affect?
No, they are same. They are same. Textbook says they are same. They are interchangeable words.
And Dr. SN, reactivity, question mark, communicability, question mark. Do we have to say communicability in assessment?
No, I'm not sure communicability is part of assessment. Activities, of course. So that's part of assessment. We often say whether mode was reactive or not, or the range was, that's where the question of range comes.
And Dr. N. Pfizer, do alcoholics have difficulty in understanding emotions of their spouse, like anger or disgust? Is it the cause for spousal abuse? Is it a right hemisphere defect? I think this is probably taking things out of the ambit of today's discussion. Probably you can address this question to Dr. Bhimsen by email.
Sure.
Dr. Akanksha, sir, can label indifferent be an inappropriate affect?
Very good question. Actually, I didn't include this concept in this presentation somehow. Labella indifference is described if I remember it right, in Sims under the heading of inability to express emotions rather than abnormality of intensity or variability. It is described under the heading of inability to appreciate or express emotions. And yes, coming back to that question, you can still consider it as inappropriate. If I remember it right, our teachers used to say inappropriateness is not only with respect to quality of emotion, even the quantity of emotions. Like, for example, if we expect somebody to be happy at a particular point of time or with respect to a particular stimulus, if he's even happy but to a lesser extent, that even the quantitatively also you can call it as inappropriate, not just the qualitative aspect of it. So labile indifference can be considered as inappropriate.
I think the question answer box is empty.
empty, sir.
Any other questions from the audience? Excuse me. Somebody, please mute your mic. Background sound is coming. There is a, even now, Dr. Bhimsen, there is a wide variation in the question of how we understand affect and emotions and mood. Many times when we teach residents, we try to tell them all these subheadings of affect. I think you need to emphasize that why we do this is to improve the reliability of assessment. And we break up otherwise we just end up with one sort of thing about affect. As it is, affect and mood ratings are so unreliable. So when we break it up into parts, the reliability goes up. That's one thing. The other thing is that while mentioning all these things, we may also need to comment about the quality of affect. That is also another thing that the youngsters need to sort of probably mind. So would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, actually, in fact, in our regular MSc, in our Proforma in our college, the first heading is quality. I missed it probably. It was not mentioned in Tasman, for which I took as a reference. Yes, the first heading often is quality, which talks about what is the predominant affect. If I understand it right, whether it is depressed, whether it is anxious, whether it is scared. So that's the quality. After once we describe quality, then we go to range, reactivity, and diurnal variation, so on and so forth. Am I right, sir?
The important thing is that we should understand that you break it up into all these small parts just to improve the reliability, inter-rater reliability. That's the main point, because otherwise it is so subjective that one person says something and another person. It's like that question about incongruous affect. I mean, there's so much subjectivity involved that the whole idea of diagnosing schizophrenia on the basis of incongruous affect lost out. So this is something that probably the residents or postgraduates should focus on.
Yes.
Would the organizers come in at this point?
Yes, sir. Bijal, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. Good evening to Sharma, sir. Thank you very much, sir, from our Indian Psychiatric Society Karnataka chapter. I thank our teacher, Dr. P.S. Sharma, for chairing this session. And actually, it was a wonderful session, sir, by Bhimsen Takalki, sir. And actually, yes, I love that book, Tasman, very much. I think I read more than 10 times above all the 3 volumes, when it was 3 volumes then earlier when we were studying. and I'm very much thankful you made me to refresh those memories, and it was a wonderful presentation. I thank on behalf of all the participants as well as the Indian Psychiatric Society Karnataka chapter. And
Thank you,
it
sir.
was a splendid work by Narayan and Harish. Done a great job. So I thank both of them as well as also to Mr. Sriram from Icon Labs, sir. And also
And
I thank participants. Yes, sir.
I would, I would personally like to congratulate Dr. Bhimsen for the excellent visuals that he has put forward,
Yes.
and
Thank you,
also
sir.
putting the learning objectives in the beginning. Of course, that shows his association with the education training department. But that apart, yes, that probably helps the students, especially in Corona days when number of patients that you see and interact with are so less. So that's an excellent thing.
Sir, I would like to make a point here, if I may. While I was preparing for this presentation, I searched for various videos. See, I thought I'll get a lot of videos on things like lability of emotion, blunted effects, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a single suitable video in YouTube or elsewhere. So I thought in my mind that IPSKC should start should start a repository where if we have a very good patient with phenomenology, we should take consent and we should videotape it and submit it to that repository, because I believe phenomenology is learned by observing and interviewing the patient and not just by reading textbooks. So this is what I thought while preparing for this presentation.
I think many of our departments like ours, we have our own teaching videos. The only issue comes up, which is that it's going into the public domain.
Yes, sir.
We've had that problem where, these days you can just photograph a whole session and then it somehow goes into the public domain. And then somebody comes and tells you, how are you showing patients like this on the net?
Yes.
So these are issues that if they can sort it out, where it cannot be photographed by the audience.
Yes.
Definitely, and whatever videos we have, we'll share. There's no problem.
Yes, actually, that's the very point which kind of stopped me from videotaping the real patients we have in the ward. So I thought I'll just ask one of our postgraduates to volunteer. But if it can happen, that would be a very good learning resource, sir.
Actually, Dr. KV Kishore sir from NIMANS, when earlier sir was working in the district mental health program, community psychiatry. Sir has made many number of videos, especially with respect to the perceptual disturbances and mood-related issues, hallucinations, and thought-related issues. Some videos are available in NIMANS, and they are available on public domain also because consent was taken from the court of law, as well as because many of the patients were inmates of the Pavilion 1, chronic patients, the sir has used. And also in the community settings also, sir has taken many videos. They're available. A few of them are there. I would like to share it. And it's a good suggestion. Definitely IPSKC will think it after discussion with seniors, especially sir. Sir has pointed out on right with respect to the confidentiality. So I will discuss with the experts and then I will get back to you. So it's a good suggestion. Thank you, Beam. Any comments, Narayan?
No, it was a privilege to have Dr. PSV Sharma sir as a chairperson and a wonderful speaker, Dr. Bhimsen technically, and they have clarified many of the issues related to the psychopathology of disorders of emotion. So wonderful, and I would like to thank both of them to be here on this platform. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Dr. Harish Kulkarni also as our co-moderator for this session, and ICON team, Ms. Beena and Sriram, for organizing the Tele-Arogya IPSKC Psychopathology series. Thank you very much. So, with the permission of chairperson, can we wind up, sir?
Thank you. Good night.
Okay.
Good night, sir.
Good night to everybody.